Okay, welcome back to Drat Veterinary Podcast. It's been a hot minute since
It's
I've
been a
been
little
on.
bit.
Yeah, I think my last one was either with Dr. Z or Dr. FIFA, who actually in the last year they've gone and done some pretty incredible things. A very quick life update with me. Let's see. Now you guys already know I got married. I have a kid now, and she's amazing. She's perfect. She's 4 months old, and things could not be better. Well, I guess for me.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Can't
it's
believe
been
she's already four
I
months.
know.
That's
And who is this stranger of a person who I've
I know
never
who's the
mentioned
voice in the
ever
background,
before?
right?
Update with the podcast, it's now going to be from, Drat Veterinary Podcast to Drat and Drake. Dr. Remington Drake over here. He's a good friend of mine that I've met some years ago. And well, our relationship has continued to grow more and more. And he's been so wonderful to join me on this journey of, well, hopefully being consistent with the podcast and
I had to,
having
man.
more than 10 episodes every 2 or 3 years. But a little background with him, and then of course, I'll let him take the floor. He is a Las Vegas native, and he can correct me if I'm wrong on that. We met at Colorado State when I did my clinical year. We became pretty good friends then, and kind of been keeping track with our group chat the last few years here and there. We had a couple projects together, and then still maintained a great friendship, and now here we are today.
Here we are.
Yeah. So who are you, Dr. Remington? Who are you?
Yeah. So yeah, you got it right. Originally from Vegas. Well, technically Henderson, but
Okay.
it's the Vegas Valley. So
Gotcha. No
you know,
idea. No idea what that means.
you've never been to Vegas?
I've been to Vegas. I never heard of Henderson. Is it?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it's weird because they so one of the things that was funny was like when I was in vet school, I guess at the time Henderson was ranked as like one of the highest paid places for a vet to start out at for like their
Interesting.
intro salary. Yeah. And so it was like, oh, if you're a new grad, you should consider going to live there. And I'm like, I'm from there. Like, and
I
I know what
did.
the reality of why that happened
Yeah.
is
Oh,
because
go
sorry,
ahead.
go for it.
No, no.
I don't
I
want
I
to
mean, I heard Vegas was pretty. I mean, it has a huge, extensive veterinary community, and when from the reputation of Vegas ER or just Vegas veterinary medicine in general is you're kind of in the wolves. It's like it's a
yeah, it's
crazy place to work for a vet as a vet there.
I mean, I guess like growing up there, it was a little bit hard to have like a comparison.
Sure.
But I think as far as I don't know, it's a little bit of a weird veterinary market. And like part of it too is, there's some fairly established dominant player. Like Dr. Jim Nave is like the guy
Yes.
within the
I've
veterinary
I've heard of his
world in
name.
Vegas. Like
Uh-huh.
he runs that city.
He
But part of it is just like because of how established he is, and he's got like such a well run operation going on there.
Mm,
Like uh, the pipeline for like getting new vets in is like that's why
that's through him.
that structure exists for why the starting pay is fairly good.
Competitive. Yeah.
um but I mean it's it's one of those things that's just like funny that of all the places that she would say, oh yeah, I should move here in the country, it's like, oh, I'll go
Move
back
next door.
home.
Well,
So
so now a little bit more about that is your parents are both veterinarians, correct? So
yes,
you were raised in
could
obviously.
not escape it.
Is that like, I mean, was that really so? My sister, for example, she's always wanted to be a vet. Or my parents are not in the medical field at all, right? But she's always wanted to be one, which I think in the back of my head was always kind of been an option just because I was exposed to it. But for you, was that like, was there ever a question, or this was just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it?
I mean, I actually like I mean, I guess it depends how far back you really want to go, right? But
Sure.
no, I mean, I would say that as far as like once I started really like seriously entertaining like what kind of career I would go into,
Mhm.
um, I think for decent amount of time, I was seeing myself going into human med, which
Mhm.
I think is, kind of a common thing for a decent number of us in
Same.
the vet world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that they're fairly adjacent in terms of, the overall prereqs and just kind of, medicine to some
A
basic
similar
level is
role in
medicine.
society, and yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So it's something that I I always had like extensive amounts of exposure to the veterinary world, but it's something that I think I kind of to some degree intended to pivot that into kind of a more human focus.
Mhm.
But it over time, I think part of it too is like growing up, you don't, you always get the question, and I, got this so many times. It's like, oh, do you want to be a doggy doctor just like your parents? And I'm just like, I don't want to be like my
Oh,
parents,
cringe.
I'm my own person kind of deal.
And look what happened.
Yeah, I know. And then after a while, you're just like, oh, actually, it's a
Yeah.
good career. So,
So did the,
um,
I mean, because so a very unique thing is, I mean, we have a bunch of friends or people in our community that whose parents were vets, and of course they end up becoming vets as well,
hmm,
and they end up taking over the practice. Now, I don't think you ever worked as a veterinarian under the umbrella of your parents and their
hmm.
hospitals, correct?
Well, part
So
of it's sorry, you can
no,
finish
no,
the
that
question.
so well, yeah. What's how come?
Yeah, I mean, part of it's just a timing thing. So
Mm,
the yeah, I mean, both my parents had hospitals. My dad had several over his career, but um, by the time I graduated, he had already passed away. So that obviously wasn't an option
yeah,
for
yeah.
working under him.
Mhm.
For my mom, she's feline exclusive, and it's something that it takes a very unique
Got
person
it. Okay.
to want to be feline exclusive. Not that I
Okay.
would have been necessarily opposed, but it's one of those things
Right.
that to me, I wanted to kind of travel the country a bit, kind of be exposed to other areas outside of Vegas. It didn't really have that draw for me to want to kind
Okay.
of come back home and stay
Gotcha.
in the little, area that I
Well,
was.
I apologize for I'm sorry for bringing up, like the reason behind that actually had a lot more of an emotional background for
Yeah,
why.
no, I mean that's
But
part of life, man.
well, yeah.
But
I mean, so
um,
you did end up doing some pretty cool stuff. I of course, we're about 5, 6, going on to 6, 7 years out, and throughout my time, I've encountered a lot of externs from vet school, or even people who are just recently graduated, and you get that kind of the number one question people ask is like, well, where should I work? How should I go about this? What should I do? I mean, you've always had a very impressive way of thinking where it's so pragmatic and so logical. But when you told me kind of your strategy and just your criteria, that was the first time I actually ever spoke with someone who was just so on top of their shit.
yeah.
Can you explain
Well,
kind
thank
of
you.
what did you do?
Yeah, I mean it's something that I think to some degree I had the benefit of having parents already in the industry, right? And
Mhm.
by extension, you get feedback from people that they know in terms of what's an early stage veterinarian supposed to do with their career. How
Mhm.
should you navigate getting that early experience? Because I think overall, most hospital owners don't like to hire new grads. I mean, fundamentally, they're a lot more work in terms of training them up. They're going. I mean, like my dad said, you're going to make mistakes starting out, and you don't become a real vet until you've gotten through those experiences, and
Mhm.
it's a rite of passage. So it's something that it's taking on new grads is it's not something people usually seek out.
Mhm.
So there's the whole back and forth as far as whether vets should do internships, not do internships.
And we have a
you
whole
know
episode on that we're going to go to,
okay, cool,
you know.
cool.
Um
So should I save it until then, or
yeah, let's save it. I think,
okay?
what I'd be interested is essentially, you jumped into emergency. I don't you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you were really open to general practice. To my understanding, from what you explained to me 6 years ago, was you looked at the places that were going to pay you the most while also promising quality mentorship. So you sacrificed location because I think you moved to Pittsburgh, right, for a year and a half
Mhm.
or something like that, and so you didn't care about where you're
Yeah.
going, the weather or whatnot. It was very much, okay, how can I maximize my income and my profit while also learning quality medicine?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not necessarily that it like paid me the absolute most, because there were jobs
Yeah,
that
it's true.
I turned down for more.
Mhm.
But I think the biggest thing for me was like definitely the early stage mentorship. I wanted a place that I felt was solid in terms of, you know, getting exposed to capable vets that were interested in teaching.
Mhm.
Um, but kind of, and this kind of speaks to the, you know, the upcoming episode on internships, is the pay disparity is substantial, and it was
100%.
more substantial back then, you know, at the time when there's internships for $30,000 a year,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
know, compared to, you know, a vet that's not doing an internship, it's a pretty massive pay drop. So it's, you know, it's not something you take lightly, and especially early on in your career. You know, one of the things that I kept in mind was like, any amount of money that I can put away to save for retirement, like that over decades will compound into something that's gonna, you know, it's gonna be a significant enough difference over that many years
Mhm.
that, you know, what you save early on in your career is so important for the growth of that portfolio. So to me, it's, I kind of looked at it as like, this isn't a decision over, you know, $40,000. This is a decision over, you know, hundreds of thousands to potentially seven figures over the very long term. So
Yeah.
that's really what I'm, you know, looking at from the financial perspective. But obviously, you know, the people that are strong advocates of internships, their opinion is, well, you're going to suffer in terms of mentorship if you
Mhm.
do that.
Mhm.
I think to some degree I lucked out in that, you know, you have to have a hospital that's in the right place at the right time with the right team willing to take you on.
Mhm.
And honestly, I wouldn't have traded my first year out for anything. That I felt, I'm really appreciative of the team that I had. So
Yeah.
I joined in on at a hospital in Pittsburgh that was ER specialty, and they had a really robust ER team when I joined on. It was,
Mhm.
I think, yeah, like 11 or 12 ER docs. They had a
Wow.
critical list. They had several specialties. Um, and I'm eternally thankful to the ER docs that I worked with. A bunch of awesome people. You know, I still think of them all the time. That they're
Mhm.
a lot of wonderful people that I got to learn a ton from, and it's one of those things that I felt pretty well supported. A lot of people would complain that, you know, even in an internship, sometimes you're kind of just thrown to the wolves, and you know, you have people you can call,
Yeah.
and but there's people that will still be left alone early on in their internship. That I didn't really feel was the case for me. That I felt like I was pretty well supported with coverage from other doctors, people I
Mhm.
could call. Like I was, you know, I was really happy with
Yeah.
how it went.
How was, I mean, you kind of, for a good year or so, you're about there for about a year and a half to 2 years, was it?
2 years.
3 years.
Two.
Two. So during that 2 year stint, and of course we have a lot of things we relate on. We have both partners also in the veterinary field who are doing residencies. Mine just finished, of course, as soon as she gave birth to our daughter, but yours is, I think, in the middle of her second year, right?
Yeah.
In ophthalmology. But can you share with me kind of how that felt, just kind of separating yourself from your people. You left your veterinary comrades from all those 4 years. You moved to Pittsburgh. Was there anyone that was close to you in your family or friends growing up? How was that for you socially? Because that seemed to be the biggest sacrifice you had to make.
Yeah. I mean, it was hard. I mean, and I think looking back on how I felt doing it, I mean, it was one of those things that I don't think I ever questioned that I felt I had to do
Mhm.
it, you know. And I think part of it was that my dad kind of had the attitude, like when I was picking my undergrad, he was just like, you know, you need to kind of spread your wings a bit and have that personal growth that comes from moving kind of out on your own and kind of getting an established sense of who you are, you know, what you want to do with your life. So his thing was like, you need to draw a radius on the US map and pick somewhere outside of that, you know, so you can have that distance and that growth.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he gave me that advice, because that's kind of the approach that I had with applying for my first job as well. But yeah, I mean, my primary thing was that I was going to go wherever I had to to get that sweet spot in terms of, really strong first year mentorship.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it essentially meant that I was moving away from everyone that I knew to a city by myself. I was long distance with Steph, but it was a hard 2 years.
I bet.
And I felt like I don't know, I almost kind of just like lived like a monk. I mean, I had friends that I ended up
You
making
still live
in
like a monk.
Pittsburgh, but yeah, it was, I think it was a 2 year period where I had a lot of, internal, introspection on like what skills I want to grow into, and what I want to do.
Yeah.
So
I can relate a little bit to that just because, I moved to Florida. I mean, the difference, of course, is I had my significant other, but moved away from all my friends and family from San Francisco to there, jumped into ER and kind of essentially
yeah,
really kind of grew out of my shell as a legitimate doctor from there. Of course, I did GP for a year and a half, but my mentorship was quite limited. Um, but you now then 2 years in Pittsburgh, I believe Steph then got matched at an internship in Florida. Is that the timeline? So you guys since then have moved to Tampa,
yeah,
which is what, 2.5, 3 hours away from me. And so we've seen each other. That's actually probably
it's
how we
more
got
like
closer over time.
more
Last
like
4 years.
four with traffic.
Four,
Yeah.
yeah. 4 hours.
As much
Um,
as we would want it to be two and a
yeah.
half, it's
Uh,
four.
But that's kind of maybe even catalyzed our relationship too, just because I mean there was a couple of those hurricane scares where you guys came down and stayed with us. I think I came
Yeah.
to visit, one or two times. So from there, you left your job in Pittsburgh. You went to Tampa. What did you do from there?
Yeah. So I took another ER position. And then, yeah, I mean, ultimately it's something that, I mean, essentially my whole veterinary career has been ER. I unlike you, I haven't done GP as an ER vet. And it's one of those things
You're
that,
not missing anything.
yeah, no, I mean, there's pros and cons. And I think there's definitely, been shifts where I've been like, would I rather be doing, you know, primary care versus ER? But I think, you speak to a lot of ER docs that have done both, and there's some degree of an addicting characterist. I don't know, like there's just something about
No, you're
ER
right.
that you just keep coming back to.
I mean, that's
Uh,
what I did, right? I left ER for what, 6 months, went to GP, and now I'm back doing ER again. So
yeah,
I totally get it. And then what? So yeah, I think you worked for a company, and then for another what, year or two, and then did you move into relief afterwards?
yeah,
Okay. And then of course recently you stopped entirely. Now you're kind of doing your own thing, which again we'll get into a different time.
yeah,
Of course, I know this is a personal thing. You know, when you have your mindset on something, you essentially go not 100% or even 200%. You essentially go 500% into something. You sacrifice your sleep. You kind of again, you kind of shut everything else down. And you go full hard and just full focused on these things. I know that you've been really into computer programming for quite a while, even before vet school, correct? So how, obviously since I know I also of course come from San Francisco, so I have a bit of an understanding of like what that entails. How did you go about this? Like, tell me about that.
yeah. So it's kind of a weird start. I never intended for it to grow into what it has, but I mean, early on, like in high school, I was always, I liked tech, I liked computers, but it wasn't anything where I was actually writing code.
You're doing MySpace where you just add little,
Yeah, dude.
little,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, it was more just, you keep track of, what's Apple releasing this year.
Yeah,
You're
oh
just
yeah.
into like more like the hardware stuff and
Mhm.
everything. But no, I mean, really kind of where it had its beginnings was it was actually helping my mom that her her computer running her x-ray machine at her hospital
Mhm.
essentially just crapped out. And I mean, part of it was probably that it completely overheated from too much cat hair on the back of the fan, that it wasn't ever anything that people look back there to clean off. So ultimately the drive partially demagnetized, and they lost part of the, I mean, the data was good. It was the software that ran the X-ray machine, either through the recovery or just from the demagnetization. Like it was non-functional. And you would think, okay, just reinstall the software and it's fine. Well, the problem was is that the company that wrote the software and sold it was defunct. Like it was out of business.
Oh,
Yeah. And that was kind
so
of a,
why not rebuild it from scratch?
no, I mean, that's way too generous for what I
Yeah.
actually ended up doing. But no, I mean, that sucks as a
Uh-huh.
hospital owner because you know, those X-ray systems are not cheap.
Yeah.
You know, talk about expensive software. That's some expensive software, right? So you basically, she was looking at this, and it was like the software as it was designed essentially had like these little mini programs that all had to talk to each other, and the problem was is that they just weren't communicating across windows and stuff, and
Okay.
there were some configurations that just were not being stored. But it was like close enough that I told my mom, I was like, just give me 2 weeks to just kind of fiddle with this and see
Uh-huh.
if I can salvage it. And long story short, I ended up just learning how to do like basic scripting, um, to be able to transfer information automatically between windows just based off of triggers on, you know, if this window appears, then it's gonna, you know, it was like basic stuff.
Okay.
But I got it working.
And that was your
And at
first
that
hit of the
point,
drug, and then you
yeah,
just
and at
couldn't
that point I
stop
was just like,
since.
well, this is actually kind of fun. You
This
know,
this
what
is
else
during
can I,
college or vet school, or when was this?
this would have been
Just as you're graduating college then.
13. Well, that would have been, no, that would have been solidly undergrad.
So,
Um,
yeah, during undergrad, I mean, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So it was something that just after that, I then started kind of putzing around with, you know, some other things that I thought could use improvement in vet hospitals. And at the time I was working as a tech in ER. And that's where I was looking at, you know, how they were doing treatment sheets. And I was just like, oh, little flow sheets or something that maybe we can make electronic. Um, and yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's grown out of that. And
And
you
I've actually, so you know, obviously when I met you in 2017, we were in our fourth clinical year. You were coding quite a bit then, and that's when
Mhm.
you kind of shared with me, you know, your side passion.
Yeah.
And you know, whenever I, you know, talk about you all the time, so whenever I do, you know, I mention how you'd go be in vet school, and everybody who's probably listens to this podcast knows how time demanding vet school is, right? But you did it. I think you did pretty well in vet school too. But on top of it, you also continue to program. And I think a couple times you might have shared with me your day to day schedule, and you can kind of correct me on this. But you had a class, and then right after class, essentially, you go home and you go to your computer and you program. Let's say you finish class or clinics or whatever at 5. You go home, maybe get a bite to eat. So you go from 6 essentially till 3 o'clock in the morning. You're just coding. You're not focusing on too much vet stuff unless maybe there's an exam, but you'll code and then essentially go to bed at when the sun comes up. You go to class and rinse and repeat. Is that
Yeah. I mean, to some degree, yes. I think ultimately, it was a hobby that I tried to fit in wherever I could.
mm.
And I mean, there were even times like during like some classes that I was sitting there kind of, you know, fussing around with something I was working
Uh-huh.
on, you know, if it was like stuff that you're like, all
Man,
right, we already kind of
I,
went over this.
you know, Avi, one of my best friends from vet school. I mean, or if not the best friend, sorry, Avi. You know, I get so frustrated when I meet people who just have a natural knack for retaining and understanding information. Because, you know, for me, I did well in vet school, but I had to put so much freaking work into it to just to get to where I feel, you know, the tier level of you and Avi where it's just like, oh yeah, okay, there he is, and then let me just go ahead and move on to my hobby, or the side passion.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think for me, it was the coding stuff that actually felt pretty like easy to pick up.
hmm.
Like I don't know what it is. Like I just
Hey, I mean,
kind
I
of,
think depending on how your
it
brain
just,
works, some
yeah, it
people
just
just,
jives with how
yeah.
I think. And so it's something that, yeah, but I like both, you know, careers. They both have really, you know, redeeming qualities to both aspects. So something that, I've always kind of looked to see, okay, how can I combine these two things?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, definitely it was something that, you know, I just enjoyed it so much that I was, definitely having nights where I was coding way up until 2 or 3 in the morning,
Yeah.
um, on weekends, and it was just something that it didn't feel like work
No,
to
that's
me.
great, and it's such a unique thing. I don't think I know too many veterinarians, aside from actually one of your CSU
Mhm.
colleagues. I won't call him out just because, well, he's a pretty introverted guy working with some awesome AI. But yeah, not too many people in the vet field, go into the no actually know how to program, and I think it is just because it requires two levels of thinking. It's very very
Yeah.
different levels of thinking. I tried
They're
it,
both,
and
yeah, they're both pretty different.
yeah,
I would say that honestly, like I think to some degree people can be a little bit intimidated by the thought of, software development, but it's actually, I don't know. I don't find it that, like, I think it's something that if you took any random vet that we know and kind of sat them down for a day and taught them, I think they would get the hang of like the basics of it, right?
I'd rather do an
Um,
RNA on like an
yeah,
intestinal foreign body than have to, I don't know,
that's
relearn
whatever.
React.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, it's something that, in all honesty, I think one of the things that really kind of kicked it into high gear was, it was during my third year of vet school that my dad passed away.
Yeah,
And I think for anyone who's gone through the experience of losing a parent, you have to find stuff to distract yourself. And for me, I chose that as my distraction. And it was to the point where, I mean, even, that was a very rough year for me.
understandable.
And
Yeah.
I think that, I you almost kind of use those hobbies as like a coping mechanism to almost an unhealthy degree.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
better than, some people will go to drugs, alcohol, and abuse
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I felt like it was a productive thing that I could really kind of just dive into and just distract myself. Because when I was working on that, I wasn't thinking about anything else. So, but the side effect of it was essentially I trained myself constantly in how to further design software, and I trained myself to spend long hours working
Yeah.
on it. So it was one of those things that it just kind of, over time, if you keep doing something repeatedly, it becomes a habit.
Which is
And now at
funny,
this point,
because your typical programmers do the opposite, where they'll go to work for about of 8 hours, but do an actual maybe 5 to 10 minutes of work a day.
right? No, I mean, they are hardworking people, but no, I mean, I would say that they don't work in the same style that I do, which is, for me, especially like when I was in Pittsburgh on my days off, I would, you know, hammer
Oh,
through
I bet.
coding all day. And my attitude is that, I'm used to working these 14-hour ER shifts. I mean, at that time, because I was just starting out, there were some days I would have like, 18-hour, 20-hour
Oh yeah.
shifts. But on my days off, basically, I would tell myself, you sit your butt down and you're going to code from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep.
Ridiculous.
And, it would be 12 hours, 15 hours. And, you learn a lot when you
Yeah.
treat coding as like your own little internship and just
Mhm.
hammer at it every day.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to the audience, just don't set yourself as a similar standard. Remy is sick, and he's got the work ethic of someone of an unhealthy individual, but
yeah, I
also
mean,
inspiring at the same time.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely, there's downsides to working yourself that hard, that I think, and that's where Steph has been, I think,
Oh yeah.
a very supportive person in my life, that she has, I think counterbalanced some of my unhealthy tendencies and like working constantly, because I'm just one of those people that if I'm awake, I have to do something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's definitely something I've learned about you for
So
sure. And well, I guess I
yeah,
might be the opposite sometimes. Sometimes you have to keep me in check. Let's
but
let's let's pivot
moving
back a
on
little
from the
bit.
coding,
Yeah.
because I know
Let's
that wasn't
No,
supposed
no.
to be the main topic of,
Well, I mean,
this.
I think it's important. I think, the whole point of this podcast really is to share, our each individual unique stories. And yours is quite unique because, again, I don't know too many vets who do what you do. But, we can kind of go back into ER medicine because that is something a little bit more of what we share
More interesting for the
for the
majority of
listeners, right?
veterinary
Yeah, I don't know.
people
Let's
listening
talk
here.
about We can talk about back-end coding database. It's fine.
It'd be so interesting.
What are your thoughts on the current state of emergency medicine? Emergency veterinary medicine, of course.
I have a lot of thoughts on it. I mean, it's a weird part of the field, and I think everyone would agree on that. That you look at like how, I guess, going way back to how it was when my dad started out in ER. I mean, basically at the time, like his vet school class was a bunch of guys, and it was pretty much all guys. I think there were 3 women in his class, which at the time was a big deal
How
because it
things have
was,
changed.
yeah. I mean, it's the opposite now
Yeah.
almost, but yeah, at the time it was, if you had a single woman in your vet school class, that was unusual. And it was a bunch of cowboy-esque type guys, or guys that just got out of the military service and stuff, and a lot of them were going to go work large animal, and small animal was not as predominant as it is now. But at the time, taking after hours call on your own was the thing. So in the 60s, when he was venturing into his own career, and he went into essentially ER medicine at the time, it was very much like you're almost kind of fighting for your own legitimacy as a vet that was offering ER, right? Like a lot of these guys that were vets out there took their own call, and if you're a guy that's trying to offer services overnight to clients, it was kind of perceived as stealing clients. And he even had other vets say, like, you're not gonna succeed, we're not gonna refer to you, you're wasting your time. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Has he always been an ER doctor through most of his career? Is it primarily ER medicine that your dad practiced?
No, he did GP, he did ER. I think he did equine for a little bit too.
Okay. So very classic 60s. 60s
Yeah, I
vet.
mean,
Okay.
it was, yeah, you're kind of the jack of all
Yeah.
trades
All right.
type thing. But no, I mean, it was something that a lot of them were just had the attitude that, it's we take our own call. You're not going to have anything to do. And his attitude was, well, you'll get sick of doing that once you have the option of, staying in bed and sleeping.
True.
And I mean, you fast forward to now, and I think for most vets coming out of school now, it's unthinkable to take your own after hours call.
Absolutely.
Right? For a significant,
for a small
number.
Animal.
Yeah, certainly. But it's something that, now and I think veterinary medicine overall is kind of mirroring, for better or worse, the structure of human medicine, right? That you have dedicated emergency departments, you have criticalists that are, providing the next level of specialized care for pets. And it's cool to see, like, how it's grown into
it just in the last 5 years, just since we've graduated, it's I feel like things have changed quite a bit already,
Yeah. And it's something that I think I don't know, my impression is that people are still kind of figuring out the optimal model for ER, and especially you sprinkle in criticalists into that mix, and it's that I feel like that's a whole hour of conversation as far as
fair.
The
I think
issues
I
that
agree.
criticalists run into.
I think a big part is almost, I feel like there's a level of pay disparity, if not lack of, just because my wife being a boarded specialist who in a specialty that is rather niche and doesn't get paid as much as your ophthalmologists or your surgeons, there's a little chip on her shoulder where when we discuss the pay disparity or mild difference between an ECC doctor and a boarded criticalist, there are ECC doctors out there that are arguably making more just because it's based on production. And how do you fit in this specialty in this growing ER caseload where they can still focus on the quality, or at least the specialty of their medicine, get their money's worth at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, my mind's going so many different directions on this. It's something that I think, I mean, I guess looking at that specific issue with criticalists versus ER docs in terms of what roles do they fulfill, and how should they be compensated. I mean, I don't think anyone would I yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say it, that I think ER docs in general would agree that, criticalists should be compensated higher. Like it just makes sense,
Absolutely,
right? Like they
100%.
deserve it.
Absolutely. It's just, but when you mentioned the current business model or how it's shaped, right? That's kind of where, well, we're still figuring that out. I don't
Yeah,
think hospitals with criticalists have really a good system where they can be compensated correctly.
yeah. Well, I feel bad for, a decent number of them that I've, met and talked to, that I feel like
Two of them being our
they're
close friends.
yeah, I mean, they just I
You know,
feel like in a decent number of hospitals they fight for legitimacy as far as, respect from those around them, and, being compensated appropriately, and kind of their role. That, I mean, I think they're getting kind of encroached from ER docs in some hospitals, and from others it's the other specialists that are
yeah,
there. But like, they are such an invaluable role in a specialty center, that I think it's something like, they're amazing to have on your team. And like, even the criticalists that I learned with starting out, like, again, second to none in terms of helpful, in terms
yeah.
of my growth as an ER doc. And I think we're still figuring out kind of how to make sure that they feel appreciated and properly backed up
That's a
in
good way to
terms
put
of
it.
their,
I think, because hospitals, I've worked at hospitals that don't have a criticalist, and
it's
we're
hard.
just dreaming of it, right? We can
Yeah,
only imagine how great it would be to have it. And then I worked with ones that have it, and it does feel like they're not treated with the kind of respect that they
they
deserve.
should. Yeah,
Yeah,
like they deserve to be appreciated for what they do,
yeah,
because they have a hard job.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I think it's, and I guess kind of, stepping away from that, I think part of the hard part with ER is, it is definitely a high demand
yeah.
department, at least from caseload. That, a lot of stuff coming into a referral center is coming first through ER, and it's kind of the pipeline that goes, you know out to the different specialties.
Hmm. That's for ER
But if
specialty, right? I mean, I guess we can go into other ER
Yeah, and there's so
only,
many different models of it, right? You have
right?
the after hours, you have the 24-hour standalone ERs. And I think it's something that there's definitely, caseload to handle, whatever model of ER. But it's one of those things that I think one of the biggest pressing issues for me is that the veterinary ERs, I think, are struggling to keep their clients happy with the
Hmm.
services that they offer. That I feel for a lot of clients that come through veterinary ERs. And, I've said to a whole bunch, you know, I know you don't want to be here. I know the last thing you want to do is having, your pet coming through an
Yeah.
ER.
I always actually start off my introduction by introducing my name and then saying, "Sorry to meet you here at the emergency." That's
Yeah,
that's my go-to.
I
Yeah.
feel for clients having to come through them. And I think this is where, it kind of opens up into the whole discussion as far as, where can we best improve how we serve clients? Because I think
So you
the
think there's a
medicine,
service issue in ER? You think is it
I mean,
is it
there's issues all over the place, right?
mm,
I think there's issues with staff retention.
absolutely.
you know ER struggle to hold techs, ER struggle to have healthy relationships with the specialty departments around them.
Yeah.
ERs can struggle to have healthy relationships with the primary vets around them, and ER struggle with the clients that come through. I mean, it's one of those things that there's a lot of friction in a lot of different directions,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of burnout in the field as a result of that. So I think, and this is almost something that I feel like we can go on an hour just on this
100%.
topic alone.
Hmm.
But to me, I think the medicine has definitely advanced pretty significantly from, say, what it was, 50 years ago, for what
Yeah.
ER is for pets. And we're providing, expanded services in terms of being able to vent patients, being able to put them on high flow oxygen, hemodialysis, and obviously these are things that criticalists are instrumental in being able to provide, but being able to have the support structure around, everything below that level of
Hmm.
of care. Um, it's a good thing. It's just and this is something that comes up always in veterinary medicine. It's the cost that I think is really a hard thing
It's tough.
for people to get right. And I think one of the things that's sad to me is, we as a field, we'll put a lot of effort into like, well, how do we improve our techniques for doing CPR and non-anesthetic arrests to potentially increase the survival percentage a couple points, or obviously we hope for more than that, but we're doing what we can to
Yeah.
try to optimize that. But then you look at what happens with, after you restore, if you do save one of them, you end up in a situation where now their modified Glasgow score is a 5. They're sitting there being mechanically ventilated, and you're just at that point saying, okay, well, now they're going to need intensive care. They may rearrest. You're having these
100%.
conversations with clients that are at that point saying, okay, I'm happy we got them back, but this isn't sustainable
No.
at this level.
And
So then you end up
yeah.
having to euthanize. So it's one of those things that it's like, okay, well, are we really kind of focusing on the overall result of what we're doing?
Mm.
You know.
There is an ongoing. I think I've had a couple. I've listened into a few CPR lectures. Not any CEs, but indirectly from like ER doctors explaining it to nurses, and it's like, well, the purpose of CPR really is just to, if you're successful, is to buy time for the owners to say goodbye to euthanize, which is kind of a sick. It's a sick
Yeah,
joke,
I mean, it's
and
sad. Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
it's something that I think, and this is where people have a lot of opinions on veg, but I think the thing that they get right in
yep.
my mind,
Mhm.
which some people disagree with me, but I think they get it right in terms of bringing the client into the middle of what goes on.
Mhm.
Because I think it, number one, helps them have a much better idea of, number one, what's going on with their pet at every stage of their illness and treatment. Number two, from what I've been told, it seems to cut down on the conflicts that can happen between ER docs and their clients, because it is ultimately a low trust environment, right?
Yeah.
Which, as hard as you can try to say, look, I do care, about what's going on. I do want to try to, get a good outcome here. Ultimately, they've never met you before.
Mhm.
And when the technician comes in with an estimate that's thousands of dollars, like it just gives a vibe of
Oh,
like, who are these people? Why are they doing,
you can't help but turn on your defense mechanisms when
exactly,
you're being threatened financially or just threatened in general, right? So no,
exactly.
100%. And I agree
And
with you.
it's
This is not sponsored by Veg. If you do want to sponsor us, just
right.
give
Yeah.
us a heads up. But I 100% agree with you. And I wanted to bring up Veg just because, I mean, when you talk about ER medicine nowadays, you can't not bring them up. They're such a
Right.
growing component of ER medicine. Obviously, they're ER standalone. They are 24/7, but they're not ER specialty. And I think to a certain degree, many of the people involved in veg understand that, because ultimately, if this is a case beyond their ER doctors, they will go ahead and refer it to an ER specialty. And I know a few sorry, critical specialists who have then been hired by veg to kind of be medical directors, or if not,
Mhm.
play a large role in their consults.
Yeah. No, for me personally, I feel like the interface between vets and their, I guess, veterinary teams as a whole and their clients is
Mhm.
where ER should improve the
Yeah.
most. And I don't think that's a fair. I don't think that's a disruptive idea, right? Like
No,
I think
I
everyone
don't think
agrees with
so.
that.
I mean, veg
Um,
is the only one, and I don't want to keep harping too much on them, but when you bring up the issues with like vet retention, relationships within the hospital, vet tech retention, I mean, I don't have their numbers, but from anecdotally speaking with the people I know in the field, they have an incredible retention for many of these aspects.
yeah.
You know?
Well, because I think a lot of the retention issues stem from the fact that and every ER doc nods their head at this, that on any given day working ER, there's a good chance you're going to get yelled at.
Yeah.
Someone's going to accuse you of stuff that is not reality. It's not true. People, I mean, in general, the amount of throwing under the bus that occurs from clients and primary vets towards ER docs, it's high enough that it's, any given day,
Not even
you're
ER
going to be able
doctors,
to.
right? But ER technicians, even the front desk people. Like
Yes,
at
yeah,
any given day, someone's getting yelled at. Someone's gonna feel terrible.
right.
And
And it's
I
not
think
a healthy work environment, right? And it's
no,
something that I think that's where we keep looking at, well, if we just try to pay them a bit more, potentially they'll be willing to do it, and that works to some extent, but at that point it's really not making people feel better emotionally about, number one, picking this career, number two, look at all the ER docs we know. I think we can both agree that there's some passive level of unhappiness
yeah,
for a lot of them on any given week. And I think that spills over into how people interact on any given day. That there's you're going to have team members that are burned out, and that creates friction and roadblocks to getting things done throughout the day. There's friction that can arise between team members and clients, and so it's something that I think any changes that we can make to try to improve that problem, like the emotional aspect of being in that environment, I think, and putting us on a better path to sustainability as a career and as a discipline,
yeah.
a specialty. I think that's where we'll see improvements ultimately in patient outcomes. People, specialists will be happier with ER's outcomes.
Yeah.
Clients will be, ultimately what counts as clients will be happier with what happens.
And I think we're going that direction. We are all millennials, if not Gen Zers at this point entering, and we have our own unique wants and needs. And I think the veterinary field just being so many years behind compared to human medicine, which is also sometimes lags behind in terms of administration and leadership. But I think veterinary medicine suffers a little bit more. They're still trying to figure out how to please our generation, I feel.
I guess I'm hesitant to chalk it up just to like a
No,
generational
absolutely not. There's so
thing, but
multifactorial, but I mean,
yeah,
we we never even brought up COVID, right? And that's kind of a big part of, man, how many people have the caseload increase just from all the COVID puppies and
it was
kittens that have come in.
insane.
It's horrible,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it just completely outstripped the ability to handle the amount of caseload that
Yeah.
everyone was seeing. And the problem is that clients in general, I think, vets as a whole don't really have good solutions to this problem. That it feels as though because we talk about how we're seeing increased number of clients that are reacting aggressively, being
Hmm.
violent, stuff like that. And I think it's, to some degree, you can kind of attribute it to say, okay, well, people are stressed, people, are having harder time affording things. And like, it's understandable from that perspective. But
Hmm.
at the same time, it's one of those things where we can't keep having that happen,
No.
because it's actually long-term harming the field's ability to provide care, because then you're burning people out. The ER that previously had 5 docs now has 2,
Two.
because 3 of them burned out from
Yeah.
having that happen. So the wait time of sitting there for 6 or 8 hours for being
Yeah.
seen previously would have been only 1 or 2, but because everybody is more upset and getting more aggressive with the team members,
Hmm.
I mean, it's a vicious cycle, right? So it's like, how do we break that?
I mean, you also have your clients' expectations. I think nowadays with social media and just having such access to all this type of information, clients can very easily be misinformed with how things actually should go, whether it's the treatment or the cost or anything like that. I mean, this is before social media, but how many people have these exotic breeds that spent all their money, anywhere between 1 to 50,000 on a freaking French bulldog, and now they come in with aspiration pneumonia and like the bill's 1,500. I'll even say that. a fraction of the cost they purchased them for, they absolutely don't want to go forward with it. There's just
Yeah.
education, I think, is also a big part that is, I think, the whole veterinary field, or I guess honestly the entire medical science field is struggling to really get appropriate medication across.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, it's like not even the, spending all your money on the puppy, which, obviously we know does happen sometimes. But I think part of it is, again, it just comes back to the trust issue,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
there's people that may have the funds to treat, but it's one of those things that, again, they just met you. And especially like I think one of the struggles is, with like online reviews and stuff, people can say whatever the hell they want to say, right? And it's something that it's not worth engaging.
mm-hmm.
And I know plenty of docs, and I'm sure myself, that people have written stuff that is completely false.
Yeah,
And it's something that you see even working your shifts, that people call and say, oh, I don't like that other doctor because they said this and that, and straight up they didn't say that. You were in the room when they were talking to that
mm-hmm.
person on the phone, and they did not say that. It's
Yeah,
that kind of stuff that
absolutely.
it's but that still gets put out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come in to the ER with that in their head, thinking, oh, you're this kind of person, you know or someone leaves a bad review of an interaction, but they didn't understand the fact that you couldn't spend 30 minutes going over what is something that you would prefer to go over a 30-minute time span. But because you have 8 patients in your triage area that are fairly critical patients, you have cluster seizures, hit by car, whatever, you can't take
Mm-hmm.
time to spend time with, having that connection that you would
Absolutely.
otherwise want to.
Yeah. It's an art.
um
It's an art to be able to, try to create trust and a relationship within 3 to 10 minutes.
yeah, and so that's where I think I think it's a bit of a disruptive approach to say, okay, well, we're going to do away with the whole, front of the vet hospital, back of the vet hospital, you
Mm-hmm.
can't see in the back. And still, there's the majority of vet hospitals kind of essentially have that policy that clients are not allowed
Mm-hmm.
in the back area. And obviously there's legitimate reasons for that, right? In terms
Of
of,
course.
you don't want clients being exposed to isoflurane or being exposed to sharps and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you design the hospital layout to be accommodating to them, I to me it makes sense,
I mean,
right?
and
Like
again,
I would want them to see.
we've seen hospitals, especially an upcoming corporation that's successful in this model. So I
Yeah,
100% agree with you. I
yeah,
think
I
I think
support it. I think
yeah,
it's the right move. And
yeah.
I think the more transparency we have in terms of bringing clients into the full spectrum of how what the reality is for what medicine is within the veterinary world, I think will bridge that gap between the team providing the care and the clients that are ultimately having to approve it and feel good about what's going on, right?
Mhm.
Like they should see everything and be understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I support it.
Okay. Well, guys, everyone who's listening here, you guys are going to get much more of Dr. Drake just because, again, he's now a part of the podcast. So I hope, I mean, of course, what we've had, as you can tell from this conversation, we have a lot of these talks. They can, every subcategory of what we talk about can go on for hours just because, well, he has got a lot of cool things to say. I am going to move on to the last part of this podcast that I've always been doing is our omasarcoma. I've been hesitant to be honest with you. I've been thinking about it. Is this something I want to keep going for the time being? I'm gonna do it, but I just always feel like it's relatively the same thing that I always have developed. So Remy, whenever the omasarcoma, I stole from one of my favorite comedians, Elisa Schlesinger, her podcast. I think she calls it Top of the Cob, where you start off, it's the best part of the cob. It's nice and crispy and buttery, and the bottom of it isn't as good. So you bring up something that you currently absolutely like or love. It could be like, oh, my favorite shirt, or oh, I love this current company that has this type of service or whatever. And then anything from what's pissing you off or what you don't like could be from noise canceling earbuds to, I don't know, some board game. I'll start first. I honestly, I don't have a sarcoma right now, but my oma, obviously, oma being typically more of a benign tumor, sarcoma usually being more malignant. So you're good and you're bad. Currently, my oma would have to be the San Francisco 49ers. They are doing so well. They're so fun to watch right now. I don't know how many people are into sports who listen, but I'm obviously from San Francisco, big Warriors fan too, who unfortunately they might be my sarcoma because they're not doing well as I'd
There you
like. Yeah.
go.
But the Niners, they we were so promising last year in the playoffs. Of course, our third quarterback got injured against the Eagles, and then of course the Eagles went ahead, go ahead and blow it to Kansas City last year. So this year we're back on track and we are just trucking through it. I'm so excited. What's your
You
OMA?
make me feel bad for not following sports.
That's okay. No,
I'm
it's
boring, man. I just,
I know you
I
are,
just work all the time.
but now you have to work on getting some good oma sarcomas.
Yeah, I'm unprepared for this. I'd say my Oma is, well, my mom's planning on coming to Florida and visiting for a little bit. So I
Really?
think, yeah, that's I'm looking forward to it.
That's so nice.
Yeah, because obviously, my whole family's kind of spread out around the country just
Yeah.
from work and everything. So
Okay.
it's we're trying to kind of bring things together a little bit
She
more.
going for Christmas or for the holidays or after that?
We're still trying to figure out the exact dates, but
Okay.
it's hopefully
Okay.
some time within that window.
Because she's now retired, right? Or is
Yeah,
she still
so
okay? So
she
freedom.
retired.
She should have visited you
Um,
sooner.
yeah, well, it's like everything with like moving and
Oh, fair.
it's busy, but um,
I think that's a great one.
I yeah,
That's
I mean, sarcoma, I don't.
I know it's hard to. I mean, I can complain about Florida traffic all the time, and I feel like I've already used that like 4 or 5 times.
I mean, it's
That's
a
why.
solid fallback,
Oh, I
right?
hate it. I know. It's just I feel it's just getting overused at this point.
Yeah, because I think for me, like I don't know, you always focus on the positivity, right? And you just kind of let
Exactly.
you got to just dispel
Yeah. And we just
the
kind of complained
negatives out of
about
your
ER. Yeah.
brain, right?
We spend the whole last 45 minutes maybe complaining about ER medicine.
Yeah,
So,
which I do want to have, honestly. Like there's a lot of really awesome parts of ER,
of
so I don't want
course.
to completely just crap
We're
on,
gonna get
the
into
bad
that,
parts. But I think in
Yeah.
terms of, where the conversation went, I think it's natural that those issues kind of bubble up first, right?
Yeah.
I think honestly, and this is so Florida,
Mhm.
it's kind of cold now, which
That's an OMA, man. What do you mean?
it's yeah,
Well, you're a Vegas
it's
guy, so I guess you can
well,
only
okay, so I was acclimated to cold weather when we were in Colorado, right? But
yeah,
like now, since moving to Florida again, it's, you just lose that capacity
I guess.
so I don't know. For me, I've got two shirts on.
Uh-huh.
I think it's 71. It's
Oh
cold.
my
It's cold,
goodness.
man.
I
Um,
love it.
the
We
step
went on a
outside is
walk.
going to be like high 60s.
Yeah, it was 56 or no, yeah, 67 last night. Pam and I went on for a nice hour-long walk with the baby. Yeah. Oh, I had to put on a little
I'm jealous,
winter
man.
coat or no windbreaker. Oh, it's great. Well, my sarcoma then. Shoot, I just had it. Oh, there's so many nowadays. And this has been going on for years, but they have so many different types of automated systems for lights or switches or
Mhm.
anything, right? And there is just too many.
Paralysis of choice.
Really, I mean, you and it's not like they all connect with Alexa or Google Home, but you go on
Yeah.
the app and there's literally hundreds, hundreds of different types. And for you to integrate it, you now have to scroll with your thumb for good 10 seconds, and just the way technology is, advanced. But
Wait, sorry. What are you scrolling on? Or you
when you're
like,
trying to choose a list of the company of whatever light bulb
oh,
you
to like buy
buy,
it online? Gotcha.
integrate with your Google Home or your Alexa,
Oh, okay,
right?
okay.
You have to sift through that company. It just takes forever because there's thousands at this point, right? And
Just
they
tell
they
Google
include all
there.
of it, because Google's like, hey, you guys want our API here it is. Just
Yeah.
take it.
Sounds like a
It's
user interface issue.
it
So
is. It really is. But there's just so many, and I get tired of it because now everyone has their own app that you have to first connect to, and then you can then hook it up to the Google Home or your Alexa. And it's just I'm tired of that. I think we need to change something up. You're an engineer, so maybe you can go ahead and do that.
not my department.
All right. So, anyways, I think Drake is here to stay, unless, well, I guess unless we don't get enough listeners, because we're both sensitive like that.
Right.
We will definitely have more episodes coming up. We're recording this, in December. This probably won't be out until January or so. But again, everyone who's been following, I've still been getting people coming in and giving me compliments and reviews about this, and a lot of support. So really, I really appreciate everyone, asking me to make more episodes. And my goal is to, yeah, we'll have some more. So other than that, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for having me.